Have you decided it's high time to start growing a little food for yourself? Maybe excited to start your first garden, but a little unsure exactly where to begin? Well, now is the perfect time of year to be designing the garden plan. Let's do it inside. Well, planning out your garden is the very first step to creating a successful and thriving outdoor growing space. In this video, we're going to show you a few simple steps to garden design, show you how to draw out your first garden plan, from selecting the right plants to organizing your space effectively. Welcome to the channel. If this is your first time here, my name's Cody, and this video is all about designing your first garden, maybe your next garden, and drawing it out. And by actually taking the time to plan out your garden carefully, you can create a very beautiful, healthy, and productive growing space that you can enjoy for years to come. So now I'm going to give you 5 steps to follow when designing your garden to make it simple as pie. Alright, so the first step is to choose the right location. You want to look for an area that gets at least 6 hours of sunlight, so you want to choose a location that gets at least 6 hours of sunlight and has good drainage. Now you want to keep in mind that the sun's going to be to the south, it's going to come up in the east in the morning, and it's going to go down in the west in the evening. So if you're getting 6 hours of sunlight during that time on your garden space, you're in good shape. And you want to think about, based on the time of day and that direction, what shade is going to be casted on your garden, or even what plants may cast a shade on the other plants depending on your garden layout. The other thing you're going to want to think about now at this time is the size of your garden and the shape of your garden, and then we can get into the layout of the garden. And another important aspect of choosing the right location is going to be, where's your water source coming from? Where's the nearest water line so you can make sure you can get water to those plants? Alright, now step number 2 is one of my favorites, and that is choosing the right plants. Now you're going to want to consider the climate, the soil, and the lighting type for your area. So I'm up here in Michigan, and I would love to be able to grow lemons and oranges. It's not happening. I can't grow what they can grow in Florida. So you're definitely going to want to take your climate. I'm in zone 5B, so you're going to want to see what your growing zone is and take that into consideration, as well as the soil and the lighting needs that we just discussed. Alright, so now make a list of your favorite plants and veggies and research which ones are suitable for your area. You can think about the colors, the textures, the height, your days to maturity and harvest date, to create a visually appealing, but more importantly, healthy and productive garden so you can grow a whole bunch of food. Alright, now on to step 3, and this is when it starts to get fun, because step 3 is to draw out your garden space. Now once you have a list of all the plants you want to grow, it's time to draw out your garden plan. So you want to start by measuring out the dimensions of your garden space and then drawing out a rough sketch of the garden layout. So you want to consider the space you have available and the type of garden you want to create. So do you want to grow a vegetable garden, a flower garden, an herb garden, or a combination of all 3? I'm actually a huge fan of a combination of all 3 and think everything should be companion planted. I'm actually doing another series on companion planting right now, so I'll put a link to that up there. Then you'll want to divide your garden into sections and create a layout for each plant. Alright, now step number 4 is probably one of the most important steps, and that is to organize your space effectively and to plan out your garden beds. And to consider the placement of your plants, your pathways, your structures, to ensure that your garden is easy to navigate and enjoyable to spend time in. There's nothing worse than being in a garden that feels more like a maze that you just can't find your way out of. Like I mentioned earlier, you're going to want to consider the maintenance of your plants and consider to plan for easy access to water and to tools. Now when it comes to planning out your beds, there's all different types and styles, from obviously raised beds to in-ground beds, grown market garden style beds, lasagna beds. So this is the time you want to decide what type of bed you want to grow in. And I have created a video on how we build our beds, so I'll put a link to that up there. Alright, now if you've watched any of our videos at all, you know that we grow in a market garden style garden. We grow in garden blocks that are 40 foot by 50 foot with 50-foot beds that are 30 inches wide. So we put 10 beds that are 30 inches by 50 foot long with 18-inch pathways, and I can fit 10 of those beds in one block, 40 foot by 50 foot. And the reason I do that is because it utilizes standardization, which makes everything in the garden easier and definitely increases productivity and maximizes our food production. But you can still use ours as an example. Like this year, for instance, we're growing primarily for ourselves and for our neighbors, but we're still using this style of garden. So another way you could lay this out, another alternative, if you didn't want to go with 30-inch wide beds, you could do 6 beds that are actually 4 foot wide and 50 foot long with 24-inch pathways, which would give you a little bit more room in the pathways. I really like the 30-inch because ergonomically, it's a lot easier when it comes to planting and harvesting. I can straddle the beds if I need to. I can reach across the bed from either side. So for me, that works best. And if I do the math, which I'm very logical and analytical at the same time, if I do the math, the 30-inch beds give me 50 square foot more growing space than doing 48-inch beds. So for me, I'm sticking with the 30-inch beds by 50 foot long. Now you can obviously, and we do at times, cut those beds in half and grow different crops on each side of the bed. Or we may grow, say, like our cucumbers right down the middle, all the way down, trellised, of course, and then do radishes along the side beside it. So that'd be one way we'd companion plant and utilize that entire bed and split it in half and split it down the middle this way instead of that way. So you can see here though, here's a pretty good example. If you want to screenshot this, go ahead. And we may actually plant our garden out this way this year. But in this first bed, we've got spinach and kale. The next bed, we've got broccoli and some herbs. The third bed, we've got carrots and beets, and then cucumbers and radishes. Fifth bed, we'll do all salad greens, and I will do that in succession planting so I can harvest it a little bit at a time every week. And then the sixth bed, we would have peppers, and I would do that all the way down the middle and then do celery on one side and green onions down the other. That works really well. We've done that many times. Seventh bed, we could have onions and garlic. Of course, the garlic you're going to plant in the fall or early spring, I would say in the fall for next year. And then eighth bed, we're going to do trellis, of course, tomatoes, and we'll interplant basil because I stagger my tomatoes, so I will interplant the basil staggered as well. And then 9 and 10 is going to be our melon tunnel. You can check out that video there on that. And we will actually probably do squash down, because the melon tunnel takes up 2 beds. So we will probably do melons down one bed and winter squash down the other. They can both climb that. And then we will utilize the ends with the 3 sisters method, meaning we could do, boy, on a 30-inch bed, we could do 2 to 3 ears of corn on each end, and we could do pole beans growing up each stalk. And then we can do our summer squash planted in front of that. So I think we're going to do the 3 sisters method, and we would do that on the north end of the garden for the sunlight, because we know that's going to grow tall. It's going to create a shade behind it. We wouldn't want to plant that on this end and shade everything out growing behind it. But that would be a really good way to utilize and maximize your space to grow a whole bunch of food in a fairly small space for a little family garden. So I think that's what we're actually going to do, similar to that for our first block of beds out here this year. So another thing you're going to want to take into consideration, of course, is the direction of your sun, which we talked about earlier. So if you're going to divide it up this side or that side, you'd want to plant your shorter plants on the south end and your taller plants on the north end. And that's why we're putting 3 sisters on the north end. You can see. Now another way to utilize that is if you're growing a crop, maybe a cooler weather crop or a crop that likes some partial shade, you can actually utilize the taller plants to cast some shade for those other plants. All right, now a little pro tip. If you're growing in this configuration with your beds running north to south, thinking about the direction of your sun, and you want to grow something that needs some partial shade, real easy to do. Let's say I want to grow some greens when it's a little warmer out and they need partial shade. Well, all I need to do, let's say I grow them with cucumbers. So I would grow the cucumbers on the west side of the bed, because in the afternoon sun, which the afternoons are longer than the morning, so that's when we get more sunlight, more hours of sunlight, that is going to cast shade behind those trellised cucumbers. over here, and you can plant your greens right there. So you'd want to plant your tall crop on the west half or the west side of your bed, and the short crop on the east side of the bed, and that'll give you a little shade in the afternoon if you're running your beds north to south. Obviously, if you're cutting them up this way, you do it like that, and you can do your shorter plants here and your taller plants behind that there. But I've gotten that question a handful of times, so in this configuration, put your tall stuff on the west side and your short stuff on the east side, and you'll get the shade that you need. All right, now your fifth and final step is to add your garden features. It's good to consider adding garden features like your trellises, your pathways, and garden art to add to the beauty and functionality of the garden. Now for me, the garden trellises are the biggest added feature that I really concentrate on, because I do it to maximize the productivity of the vegetables that I'm growing, but man does it add to the aesthetics of the garden. So for me personally, it would be trellising. I love trellising my beans, my tomatoes, my cucumbers, and by doing that, it adds all kinds of texture, all kinds of depth, and all kinds of beauty all over your garden. So the fifth and final step is to add your garden features to really enhance what's going on. Now drawing out your garden is a great way to visualize your garden and just make better decisions overall when it comes to planning it out. So here are just a few tips to help you get started. First one, use graph paper or garden app to help you draw out your garden plan. That'll really make it simple and give you a good visualization and a plan to move forward for the season. Second, measure your garden space and draw it to scale. Then you can get a real accurate depiction on what exactly you can fit in there and how much you can grow. Third, consider the sun and the wind patterns when drawing out your garden space. Fourth, group plants together based on their growing requirements. I'm doing a whole series on companion planting. I'll put a link to that up there. And fifth, make sure you create pathways to make it easy to get in and out of your garden and maintain and do everything you need to do. I probably wouldn't go less than 18 inches. You may prefer 24 inches. I know some people go down to 12-inch pathways, and that just, for me, isn't enough to get a wheelbarrow down there. Now, creating your first garden design can be a very fun and rewarding experience. And by drawing it out, you can create a garden that meets your specific needs, requirements, and preferences. Now, by following these steps and taking the time to design out your garden plan, I am confident that you will be able to create a garden space that you'll be able to enjoy for years to come. So follow these tips and tricks to get started, and you will be well on your way to growing a beautiful, productive garden and growing a heck of a lot of food. And if you really want to figure out how to maximize your production, check out this video here, and we'll see you on the next one.